All right, here now to discuss what the state's new workplace harassment laws mean is Kathryn Barcroft. She is the special counsel for the Solomon Law Firm. Thank you very much for being here with us on Empire State Weekly.
Thank you for having me.
And you've represented people on both sides of this issue, and now we're seeing the law's been made much stronger. What aspect of it do you think is going to prove to be the most significant in the ways that it's been made stronger?
I think the most significant aspect of it is lowering the standard for a hostile work environment for sexual harassment and other types of discrimination. So at the federal level and previously in New York State, although not in New York City has always had a more progressive law, you had a severe and pervasive standard where in order to establish a hostile work environment, a victim would have to allege that the conduct was sufficiently severe or pervasive to create an abusive environment that alters their working conditions, and a court would look at the totality of circumstances, the frequency of the conduct. Now the standard in New York State, in line with also New York City, has been lowered, so an individual victim just has to prove, if they're part of a protected class, that they've been encountered inferior conditions that have altered the workplace. So they've been treated essentially less well than other people in the workplace that are not in that protected category. Another part of this is that one of the affirmative defenses is that it does have to arise to more than petty slights or trivial inconveniences. So it does have to be significant, but it's not as high as a severe and pervasive standard. There's also an elimination of the defense, the fair health defense, and that means essentially that if an employee doesn't necessarily file an internal complaint that's investigated and filled out all the forms they need to fill out, they may still be able to bring a sexual harassment claim successfully or other discrimination claims successfully.
The things that you're mentioning, a lot of them are very nuanced. So is this going to actually make it harder to prosecute in these cases?
I think it's going to make it a lot easier. I think that it's going to be easier for victims to get into the courtroom to have verdicts in these types of cases, because you're not going to have to prove that all this very long pattern of discrimination or sexual harassment or hostile work environment. In fact, even one action could be sufficient under the new law if it's severe enough. Not if it's severe enough, but if it's considered you're treated less well or inferior. So I think it is going to help victims get into the courtroom.
This affects companies all over New York State, whether they're large corporations or I guess even if you have 1 or 2 employees. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
It applies to any company with even one or more employees. So it is a very expensive law.
So in the past, a lot of companies who've come across this have settled things quietly and done things quietly. There are some changes in the law that kind of remove that with the non-disclosure issues. Explain those to us.
Right. So this is sort of the second wave of legislation in response to Me Too in New York State. And there was already some legislation about non-disclosure agreements, and the fact that now it has to be an employee's preference to enter into a non-disclosure agreement and a settlement agreement regarding the facts and circumstances related to sexual harassment that you're settling the case about. So now these types of non-disclosure agreements apply to all discrimination victims, and it has to be the employee's preference. And there's a 21-day waiting period. So if you're provided with a settlement agreement, you have 21 days to consider whether or not you'll sign it with this non-disclosure clause, and you also have 7 days to revoke it. It's similar to the Age Discrimination Act. If you have an employee is over 40 years old and they execute a separation agreement, you also have that 21-day waiting period and 7-day revocation period. So it's similar to that type of law.
Also, for employers, it used to be that the employee had to come and let them know if there was a problem, right? And hasn't there been a bit of a change now with this law that people will still be able to, whether or not they brought that complaint to their employer's attention?
Yes, that's exactly right, and that's what I was speaking about with the elimination of that defense. Now, you should still, I don't want to say don't file a complaint. I think employees should still go and file a complaint, but an employer can't escape liability just because they say, well, you didn't file this specific form, which is sometimes confusing for plaintiffs, right? Because there's a lot of forms on the website. Did they do it exactly right? So those are issues that really shouldn't prevent a plaintiff from getting into the courtroom.
On the other hand, though, for the employer, they may want to do the right thing, and if they don't know about it, they're in a difficult position now. I've seen people say that managers are going to have to be much more on the job and much more aware about what's going on, but what would you tell employers to do?
I think be proactive, know what's going on in your workplace, if somebody does report something to you, take it and put it in a form. You can fill out the form for the employee, make sure there's investigation done, be proactive, because it's important actually to have and also the training will help. The training which I spoke about previously on here, you have to have your training done in New York State by October.
Of this year.
Of this year. So it's coming up, and it's very important, and that's a preventative measure as well. You also now under the new law have to hand, when you have a new hire, you have to hand that new hire a copy of your sexual harassment policy. So they're aware of what your policy is, that it's in compliance with New York State, and that's an important part of this as well that's came out in the new legislation.
All right, here's a simple question. If I'm a small business, I have to meet this October deadline to train my employees on sexual harassment issues. How do I do that? And where do I find help? Is there help?
There is help. There is a lot of help. It's all online. It's on the New York State website. You can even Google it. You can say, look, I want to learn about training policies. I want to see what I have to do. And it actually has a sample training policy on the New York State website. It has a sample policy, sample training, and as long as you meet what's online, or go above it if you want to.
What does training involve? Can I do it online, have people log onto a computer and do training? Do I have to bring somebody in person?
You could bring somebody in person, you could have it online as long as it's interactive. One of the requirements is that it's interactive. You have to provide hypotheticals. You'll see on the website that there's actually hypotheticals provided that you can use those hypotheticals in your training that have you answer, is this sexual harassment, yes or no? Is this, and sort of go through all the different facts and different stages of an actual real life scenario of discrimination and harassment.
Do I need an attorney and have to pay a lot of money to go through this process if I'm a small company?
I mean, I think it's always advisable to have an attorney, but you can go online. You can look at the procedures online, and as a small business, and if you're just in a business of even one or more employees, a small business, you can go online and look at these. That's why the New York State did that, because they want everybody to have these policies in place, and so while it's advisable to have an attorney, you can do it by looking at sort of the website and going through what the requirements on there.
We're about out of time, Kathryn, but you can find all this information online on the state's website and be useful, especially if you're a small company who's worried about how to pay for this. We've been talking with Kathryn Barcroft from the Solomon Law Firm about sexual harassment training and the new laws here in New York State. Thank you again. Well, coming up,